So let's dive a little bit more into our introduction to George Orwell's great work, Animal Farm. Now, a lot of people say it's just a criticism of communism, and it's basically Orwell's critique of the Soviet Union, of Soviet communism. Yes, it actually is. There is truth to that. Orwell was quite upset during his travels in Spain, supposedly, as some of his biographers have said, and he said in various interviews, he was quite shocked during his travels in Spain when he had some kinds of encounters with agents from the Soviet Union. And being in Spain, he was shocked at the long reach that Stalin, who was the leader at the time, had. He basically could reach across Europe and meddle in the internal affairs of Spain. And he thought this was supposed to be a liberation in the name of freedom and workers, and it's just degenerated, as Orwell said, into some kind of terrible, monstrous joke. So Orwell always was a committed socialist. He says this very clearly, and I've talked about this in earlier videos, where he supports it, but he's also very critical of the abuses of it and when it goes astray. So there is truth in saying that it is a critique of Soviet communism. It's also a critique of ideologies in general. And so we'll see how this unfolds during the story. But I think one sort of an encapsulating way to think about what Orwell was after in this book, Animal Farm, was to give us a larger moral, right? Not to tie the book to a specific event. If it's all it's about, if it's figurative meaning, shall we say, it's got its literal meaning, it's the story about the animals. If its figurative meaning is just a critique of the Soviet Union, well then fine, it can be read that way, and that's interesting, but it's not as universal as one would think if you can say, no, its figurative meaning is much broader than a critique of the Soviet Union. Instead, I'm going to take what Orwell said about the book. The author, is not always the best source for criticism of the work, but in this case, I think Orwell's point about the work is an interesting one, and it broadens the scope of the figurative meaning of Animal Farm. And he says primarily what he wrote the book for was to block people from becoming or having or falling prey to what he called the gramophone mind. Now that's a dated image now, because he said it decades and decades ago when people used to listen to music on gramophones, but it's easily updated. But let's keep it in the original context. What's a gramophone? A gramophone was essentially a record playing device. So you would put the record on it, and now think about this. Think about the mechanics that goes into this. A gramophone, you would put the disc on it, and on the disc there were grooves, and you would put a certain instrument, a stylus or a little needle that would follow the little grooves, and then the music would come out, not really a speaker, but it looked more like a large kind of a funnel or a horn. But basically it was a record player. Now, what's the gramophone mind? Well, think about it. What does a gramophone do? It plays records. What records? Any record. Does it make any judgments about what it plays? No. If you put symphony music, it'll play that. Put, Happy Birthday, it'll play that. Anything, it will sing. And play the music. And he said that's what you don't want your mind to be, is a gramophone, where any kind of thing that's loaded in, you're just singing along with it. The gramophone mind is essentially Orwell's metaphor for the absence of thought and simply the parroting of ideology, or the parroting and the repetition and thoughtlessness of a gramophone. So that's what he really, the larger figurative meaning is the danger of how, if you're not careful, society will turn you into a gramophone mind, and basically there will be a few people in power pushing their ideology, and you'll be just singing it as you go along. Now, again, it's an allegorical novella, so it's a short work. It's only 10 chapters, takes place over a number of years, so it violates those old-fashioned unities of time where they should take place over a day or so, but it doesn't violate the old-fashioned unity of place. It really takes place solely within the context of a single farm. It starts off as Manor Farm, run by a farmer named Jones, but then eventually, after the Revolution, it becomes Animal Farm. And the story, more or less, the literal and the figurative story, largely starts there.